Hey, welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Thank you, patrons, for being here. I really do appreciate it. This is the bonus show where we are going to continue a conversation about this Jonathan Haidt article. Talked on the big show with our panel. They kind of tore it apart. I don't know that I agree with them totally. I do think there is some cause for concern when it comes to social media's effect on our personhood and our society. But you know, he kind of gets into this a little bit more, and I just wanted to continue. I don't know exactly where we left off here, but obviously the big change since this article came out was the purchase of Twitter by Elon Musk. And I have to tell you, the schadenfreude that I have of this has been great. As somebody who has had... You know, I mean, we've talked about it almost ad nauseum, so I won't bore you with too many details. But, you know, I've been told so many times, just start your own Twitter. Just, you know, there we go. Start your own Twitter. You're kind of making this up. You're being ridiculous about all of this stuff. And I apologize for the bird, by the way. The window is shut, and there is still a bird. There's like a nest of birds, like literally just 2 feet from me in my neighbor's house. So there's nothing I can do about it, and it just bleeds into my podcast now, and it's super irritating. And I don't know what illegal and unethical means I might need to take to fix this nest issue, but we'll see. So, yeah, I have to admit, the overreaction to Musk buying Twitter has been hilarious. There's no other way to say it. The reality is that social media censorship has been happening. It's been happening to conservatives. You can tell it by the amount of conservatives popping back on Twitter in the last couple days. Tucker Carlson, the day of the purchase, was back. I saw one MAGA person who was like, yeah, I got banned 2 months ago or last November, and now here I am again. So there's... You know, I mean, I live in a right-leaning ecosphere, and I know that there's leftists out there who are also getting banned, and, you know, I kind of thought, I don't think I said it anywhere publicly, but, like, all these people who don't think that these algorithms that censor people for stupid things, and they're overdoing the censorship, especially at Facebook and Instagram, all these people who don't think that's real are really going to be in for a rude awakening if there's a war. Now, we didn't slip into a world war, hopefully not yet, or at all, but, you know, the people who didn't think that censorship was taking place and that it was overblown and just sort of a conservative strategy to create a need for new alternative media, which is true, they'd be in for a rude awakening. And so how hilarious was it to watch so many of those people, like, put down their signs, walk across the street, and pick up the other guy's signs? It's a private company. I started seeing conservatives go, it's a private company. They can do what they want. I'm like, that's literally what you've been arguing against. I literally saw one person who's been arguing against it's a private company. Like, yes, it's a private company. Here's the weird history of this. So, like, in 2018, when Austin Peterson was banned, when he was running for Senate in Missouri for a political opinion, that was a wake-up call to me. Austin still gives me credit to this day for calling it in early 2018. Like, these companies are going to start moderating political content, and that's going to be really bad for the public discourse. And it was, and I was right. And removing Alex Jones was really bad. Because all that did was make him an intoxicating secret place to go gather new knowledge. And look, the entire Republican Party in 4 years has turned into Alex Jones. Not just because of social media censorship, but it certainly helped. And what was I saying? It sucks getting old. Anyway, so I think all you need to know is I was right. That's the most important part of this little diatribe, is that I called it. I was right. Oh, when I used to say this back then, all the, like, Mises types would kind of go, well, it's private property. Don't you believe in property rights? Like, yes, but these sites are incredibly important in terms of public opinion and persuasion. And it's, free speech isn't just about what the government can and can't do. Free speech is a value that one holds in terms of open speech. I think you have to negotiate within those limits, right? Like there's, you don't want porn on Facebook. If you're going to allow, I don't want porn on Facebook. I'm sure there's porn on Twitter. I think there is. I don't see it though. Right? Because they have tailored their algorithms and you get a lot of choice. And so Twitter in a lot of ways is the best of these bad neighborhoods because you get a lot of tools to kind of control what you see, and they have a more open ecosphere than like Facebook, for instance, which is really closed off, really authoritarian, I think, in the way that it manages people and information and has made their product almost unusable. Not just for political talk, but just as a matter of the content that you see. If you're trying to run a business, even advertising now is incredibly censored and hard to deal with. It's a stupid company, and I won't call it metaverse because they're stupid. But you within the, if you have your own Facebook group, you've probably kicked somebody out of that Facebook group. You've deleted somebody off of you've banned someone on your Facebook, right? Because even within your own principles of free speech, you have your own limits, right? But every individual should be able to set their own limits as to what they see. But if you own a private company, you shouldn't allow illegal things. You can choose not to allow porn. You can say, I don't want abuse of any kind. So if you're running around calling people the N-word, you're out, right? So there's I think the tension that Musk is going to have is saying, yes, I'm a free speech maximalist. I agree with you. I am too. I think everyone should have the right to say exactly what they want, whenever and wherever they want. As long as they're willing to accept the consequences, you do what you want to do. I'm not going to put you in jail for it. And I may not host you or allow you to be on my network, but I'd rather know what you think because we've had open dialogue than for you to hide it, right? So I tend to fall on the maximalist end of the free speech stuff, but not totally, right? Like if I were a total free speech advocate, I'd let Hody, run porn on Enemy of My Enemy and, have a podcast for, I don't know what, but you know what I mean? Like there's every person's own boundaries on how they want to operate this stuff. But it's clear, no matter what phony baloney research you see, through COVID, for instance, they just got a taste of blood in terms of taking information off. Okay, let's say you don't want Robert Malone on your platform, right? Fine. Let's say you decided that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is negative for society and you have power to remove him from your platform. You want to take him off? Okay. But, how does that end up translating to, deleting memes with bleach in it? You know what I mean? There's... I don't know if I'm making my point right. It's hard to explain to people what you've experienced because when something happens to you so frequently and it just becomes so constant that you become used to it. It's not like the first time you had your heart broken, you can walk through and explain those feelings, where you were, what happened, so much better than when you're older and just kind of dating and breaking up with people and it's just sort of right? So I've never gotten banned or removed or anything for because I intentionally pushed false information, right? I've always gotten banned for jokes, and I've gotten banned for maybe posting an article that 6 months later Facebook finds it to be wrong, which, who hasn't ever posted an article and then information changes and then it's wrong months later? and for those reasons, I've basically had the We Are Libertarians business greatly hampered. Like, I don't know. So you look at it and you go, well, why? What? You're punishing the moderates? You're punishing the people who do hold the values that you want, people on our side to have? I don't know. I don't get it. It's just really like, it's incredibly stupid. So I don't know if Elon Musk is going to solve the problem. I don't know if Elon Musk is going to get in there and have a bunch of meetings and realize the task is really big and really hard, and we see minimal changes. And, the big stuff gets solved easy, like not banning Tucker and Milo Yiannopoulos. But the bots, like, I don't want Russian bots on Twitter influencing our elections. Like, I'll just be straight up with you. I don't consider a foreign power using hundreds of thousands or millions even of fake accounts to influence our politics to be free speech. Maybe it is in your mind, but fuck that, right? Like, intentionally, Vladimir Putin intentionally making things up to destabilize our country around lies. I don't like that. But does Daniel McAdams at the Ron Paul Institute have the right individually to believe those things, say those things, and stooge for Vladimir Putin every day on Ron Paul's Facebook page? Absolutely. He absolutely has that right. Because I want to know what his information is. I want to hear him. He could be right. But I have the adult responsibility and the agency to hear that information. So I don't know what it's a big challenge, and Twitter could get worse if it's possible. But we don't know that. It could get better. And so saying this is like the end of This Week in Tech and Twit was hysterical. Like, this is the end of free speech as we know it. Democracy is coming to an end. Like, I don't know what happened to Leo and Jeff Jarvis, but like, you've lost your mind. You don't know what he's going to do. You don't know what the results are going to be, and you're making things up, and you're being hysterical for no reason. So those are my thoughts on Elon Musk. We may or may not talk about it on Saturday. We probably have to, but like, I've got like 5 minutes of opinion in me on it. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about this article about the Jonathan Haidt wrote, and just give you a little bit more of a taste of what he spoke about in this. And he starts out, talking a lot about the social media stuff. Here, let me bring this up, and all right, there we go. So you can see me and the article if you're watching on the YouTube video, which I don't know if it's YouTube. I'm just putting it in the Facebook group. So if you're listening to this and you want to join the Dear Leaders Court Facebook group, please do. We air the videos there. You can watch the videos and follow along there. So the American culture war and decline of cross-party cooperation, he writes, predates social media, its arrival. The mid-20th century was a time of unusually low polarization in Congress, which began reverting back in the 70s and 80s. Then obviously with Newt Gingrich in 94, it became pretty intense. Well, let's think about why, okay? You had the greatest generation. You had, Andy Taylor and Opie on Mayberry on TV, and Andy Taylor was a military vet and deacon at his church, and volunteered in the community, and he was a local sheriff and honest and just believed in America and Aunt Bee's apple pie, right? And my grandfather was a Marine in World War II as well, and had a deep commitment to America and to institutions. Was not a political person, but was very involved in his community. You had World War I and World War II generations cooperate through major institutions to, in the World War II's case, save America and the world from Nazis, right? So you had, they saw institutions up close and operating in pretty significant ways. And the baby boomers resisted that. They rebelled against that. And so they came in and said, well, we want to shake these things up or permanently alter. Think of young Hillary Clinton and all that she wanted to accomplish. And then, so the boomers come in and then kind of, learn to love the Borg. And then here comes the millennials and Gen Z, which are basically like, let's blow everything up. What's an institution? And so things have kind of changed. So what changed in the 2010s? Let's revisit Twitter's engineer of the loaded gun to a 4-year-old. A mean tweet doesn't kill anyone. It is an attempt to shame or punish someone publicly while broadcasting one's own virtue, brilliance, and tribal loyalties. It's more a dart than a bullet, causing pain but no fatalities. Even so, from 2009 to 12, Facebook and Twitter passed out roughly 1 billion dart guns globally, and we've been shooting at one another ever since. Social media has given a voice to some people who had little previously, and it has just made it easier to hold powerful people accountable for their misdeeds, not just in politics, but business, arts, academia, and elsewhere. Sexual harassers with Me Too, and creating a lot of accountability, which I'm all for. We talked about that as a major positive. But the warped, quote-unquote, accountability of social media has also brought injustice and political dysfunction in 3 ways. First, the dart guns of social media gave more power to trolls and provocateurs while silencing good critics. Research by political scientists Alexander Bohr and Michael Bang Peterson found that a small subset of people on social media platforms are highly concerned with gaining status and are willing to use aggression to do so. They admit in their online discussions they often curse, make fun of their opponents, and get blocked by other users reported for inappropriate comments. Across 8 studies, Bohr and Peterson found that being online did not make most people more aggressive or hostile. Rather, it allowed a small number of aggressive people to attack a much larger set of victims. And isn't this true? Doesn't this feel true? Especially being in the Libertarian Party, where they can't organize a birthday party well in the Libertarian Party, but online it feels like they're just dominant. But they pose no real threat, right? That's why all you libertarians tweeting that the feds follow you, no, they don't, because you don't actually organize anyone. You just tweet with a bunch of your friends, and you're not scary to anybody. Additional research finds that women and black people are harassed disproportionately, so the digital public square is less welcoming to their voices. Having been at the hands of some of those swarms from the alt-right, it's not fun at all. And I've been in the mentions of some of the leftist swarms that happen to people like Tom Woods and Dave Smith, and that's no fun either. But, the more famous you are and the bigger your Twitter is, the less fun it is. I've turned on all the controls, so unless I follow you, I can't see your reply to me. So Twitter is like my favorite place because it's so peaceful. I can say whatever I want and it's not that I don't have accountability. It's that I just don't see opinions from people that I don't have relationships with. I value your opinion if you and I know each other. I don't really care as much if I don't know who you are. Second, the dart guns of social media give more power and more voice to political extremes while reducing the power and voice of moderate majorities. The Hidden Tribe study by the pro-democracy group More in Common surveyed 8,000 Americans in 2017 and 18 and identified 7 groups that shared beliefs and behaviors. The one furthest to the right, known as devoted conservatives, comprised 6% of the population. The group furthest to the left, the progressive activists, comprised 8% of the population. The progressive activists were by far the most prolific group on social media. 70% had shared political content over the previous year. The devoted conservatives followed at 56%. So it just feels like this big, giant leftist Borg is just dominating everything, when in reality, 8% of them may just be 70% of the comments on Twitter. And it makes our little brains who can't handle complexity think that somehow we're being dominated by people, when in reality, the world is far more moderate. The other thing about these different extremes is they go after their moderates, first and foremost. It's like, why do you see anti-Chris Wallace memes more than you see like a Cenk Younger from the Young Turks memes? Partially because Chris Wallace isn't going to fight back because he's old and just, I'm a member of the media and I just am part of this institution, and the institution demands that I just not sully myself. It's kind of like Downton Abbey. Like, where we are now watching Downton Abbey, and the family just can't bring themselves to lower because of the rank. And, the American wife's like, fuck your friends. Who cares about your friends? But the reality is they're obsessed with Chris Wallace because he's a moderate. Moderates are the people who can put the stop to nonsense. You expect a Democrat to hate a Republican and a Republican to hate a Democrat and for them to fight. But when the people in the middle weigh into a group, an in-group argument, the people who are kind of, you can have like the Fakertarians on one side and the Mises people on the other side. But like when Spike Cohn weighs in, you sort of listen to him more because he's not really a part of any of those groups. He's sort of somewhere in between and doesn't really take sides. I know, Fakertarians, what you think, but he really doesn't. So the moderates are often the first casualties in a turf war for, battle of a movement, because they draw the most ire because they're traitors to the cause. You expect the other people to oppose you, but it just drives you kind of crazy that the person that you agree with 95% of the time doesn't like you or doesn't think your tactics are right, and it just gnaws at them. So there's a lot of, abuse in being a middle person, a moderate person in one of these different movements and groups. Now, he goes on to write that the two extreme groups are similar in surprising ways. They are the whitest and richest of the 7 groups, which suggests that America is being torn apart by a battle between two subsets of the elite who are not representative of the broader society. What's more, there are two groups that show the greatest homogeneity in their moral and political attitudes. This uniformity of opinion, the study's authors speculate, is likely the result of thought policing on social media. Those who express sympathy for the views of opposing groups may experience backlash from their own cohort. In other words, political extremists don't just shoot darts at their enemies, they spend a lot of their ammunition targeting dissenters or nuanced thinkers on their own team. In this way, social media makes a political system based on compromise grind to a halt. Finally, by giving everyone a dart gun, social media deputizes everyone to administer justice with no due process. Platforms like Twitter devolve into the Wild West with no accountability for vigilantes. A successful attack attacks a barrage of likes and follow-on strikes. Enhanced virality platforms thereby facilitate massive collective punishment for small groups or imagined offenses with real-world consequences, including innocent people losing their jobs and being shamed into suicide. When our public square is governed by mob dynamics unrestrained by due process, we don't get justice and inclusion. We get a society that ignores context, proportionality, mercy, and truth. And that is why I think a lot of people on the left are worried about Elon Musk, is he doesn't really care about like proportionality and mercy and truth in their mind. He doesn't care about justice or inclusion in their mind based on, what they've read about Amazon and the very real problems of racial discrimination there. They are like, they see it as a net negative for it to move backwards from a governed board by a group of people that agree with them to somebody that doesn't share in their values. So you can understand why they're concerned, but I just have to say to them, like, this is Twitter, and you can delete the app. It is not your next door neighbor. You can literally go and meet people in person. We did it for millions of years as the human species, and you can do it again. Like, it's fucking Twitter. Like, it's not real life. He continues, the most pervasive obstacle to good thinking is confirmation bias, which refers to human tendency to search only for evidence that confirms our preferred beliefs. Even before the advent of social media, search engines were supercharging this bias. And you saw that during, flat earth debates, 9/11, all that stuff. Excuse me. Now, the most reliable cure for confirmation bias, he writes, is interaction with people who don't share your beliefs. They confront you with counter-evidence and counter-argument. John Stuart Mill said, "He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that," and urged us to seek out conflicting views from persons who actually believe them. People who think differently and are willing to speak up if they disagree with you make you smarter, almost as if they're extensions of your own brain. People who try to silence or intimidate their critics make themselves stupider, almost as if they are shooting darts into their own brain. Talks a little bit about the, epistemic operating systems that Jonathan Rosch writes in his good book, Constitution of Knowledge, that a set of institutions for generating knowledge from interactions of biased and cognitively flawed individuals. So, Western society thrived because of these different institutions that helped us kind of balance all of these different concerns and think beyond the individual in systematic ways that kind of help check biases and get beyond, our own cognitive flaws. English law developed the adversarial system so that biased advocates could present both sides of a case to an impartial jury. Newspapers full of lies evolved into professional journalistic enterprises with norms that required seeking out multiple sides of a story, followed by editorial review, followed by fact-checking. Universities evolved from cloistered medieval institutions into research powerhouses, creating a structure in which scholars put forth evidence-backed claims with the knowledge that other scholars around the world might be motivated to gain prestige by finding contrary evidence. Part of America's greatness over the last 120 years came from having developed the most capable, vibrant, and productive network of knowledge-producing institutions in all of human history, linking together the world's best universities, private companies that turn scientific advances into life-changing consumer products, and government agencies that supported scientific research and led corroboration that put people on the moon. Now, this arrangement is not self-maintaining, Rausch writes. It relies on an array of sometimes delicate social settings and understandings, and those need to be understood, affirmed, and protected. So what happens when an institution is not well maintained and internal disagreement ceases, either because people have become ideologically uniform or because they have become afraid to dissent? So, as he wrote in his great book, with Greg Lukianoff, The Coddling of the American Mind, he goes on to kind of talk about the way that universities have been, under assault from the shift was they're all in chronic fear of getting darted. The shift was the most pronounced in universities, scholarly associations, creative industries, and political organizations at every level. And it was so pervasive that it established new behavioral norms backed by new policies seemingly overnight. The new omnipresence, enhanced virality, social media meant that a single word uttered by anyone, even spoken with positive intent, could lead to a social media firestorm. And we see that with, Ilya Shapiro had a poorly worded tweet at Georgetown Law. He's a conservative writer, Cato Institute fellow, has been on administrative leave for making everyone feel very unsafe for what he said. Matt Lewis just did an interview with him, if you want to hear more of his side of the story. And these institutions started punishing internal dissent, and they shot darts into their own brain. And he spends a lot of time kind of talking about, all of these different ways that all of these different things have hurt themselves, from journalism to institutions. So the stupefying process, he writes, plays out differently on the right and left because their activist wings describe the different narratives. The Hidden Tribe study tells us devoted conservatives score highest on beliefs related to authoritarianism. Shocked. They share a narrative which America is eternally under threat from enemies outside and subversives within. They see a life as a battle between patriots and traitors. According to the Hidden Tribes, Karen Stenner, they are psychologically different from a larger group of traditional conservatives, 19% of the population. Again, this is 5% of the population of these devoted conservatives, whereas traditional conservatives, probably like myself, are 19% of the population, who emphasize order, decorum, and slow rather than radical change. Only within devoted conservatives' narratives do Donald Trump's speeches make sense. To no one else does anything that Trump does make sense. And he goes on to talk about the QAnon conspiracies and authoritarian stuff and how that's all kind of captured the party. Then he talks about the Democrats. They've been hit hard by structural stupidity, though in a different way. And the Democrats, the struggle between the progressive wing and the more moderate factions is open and ongoing, and often moderates win. The problem is that the left controls the commanding heights of the culture: universities, news organizations, Hollywood, art museums, advertising, much of Silicon Valley, and the teachers' unions and teaching colleges that shape K through 12. And in many of those institutions, dissent has been stifled. When everyone was issued a dart gun in the early 2010s, many left-leaning institutions began shooting themselves in the brain, and unfortunately, those were the brains that inform, instruct, and entertain most of the country. So liberals in the late 20th century shared a belief that the sociologist Christian Smith called liberal progress narrative, in which America used to be horrifically unjust and repressive, but thanks to the struggle of activists and heroes, has made and continues to make progress towards realizing the noble promise of its founding. That story easily supports liberal patriotism, and it was the animating narrative of Obama. It is also the view of traditional liberals in the Hidden Tries studies, 11% of the population, who have a strong humanitarian value, are older than average, and are largely the people leading America's cultural and intellectual institutions. So, if you're from Indianapolis, think Broad Ripple. And all those old-timers there living in those, going to yoga. But when the newly viralized social media platforms gave everyone a dart gun, it was younger progressive activists who did most of the shooting. And they aimed a disproportionate number of their darts at older liberal leaders. Confused and fearful, the leaders rarely challenged the activist or non-liberal narrative, in which life at every institution is an internal battle among identity groups over a zero-sum pie. And the people on top there got there by oppressing the people on the bottom. The new narrative is rigidly egalitarian, focused on equality of outcomes and not rights or opportunities. It is unconcerned with individual rights. Now, the universal charge against people who disagree with this narrative is not traitor, it's racist, transphobe, Karen, or some other related scarlet letter, making the perpetrator as one who hates or harms a marginalized group. The punishment that feels right for such crimes is not execution, it is public shaming and social death. Now, you can see this, and he goes on to give a bunch of different examples, but I don't think we need to do that. I think we're all pretty Now, he talks about this guy named David Shore, who, after the protest of George Floyd, some of which included violence, the progressive policy analyst David Shore, then employed by Civis Analytics, tweeted a link to a study showing that violent protests back in the 1960s led to electoral setbacks for Democrats in nearby counties. Shore was clearly trying to be helpful, but in the ensuing outrage, he was accused of anti-blackness and was soon dismissed from his job. The Shore case became famous, and anyone on Twitter who has already seen doubles the basic lesson of this: don't question your own side's beliefs, policies, and actions. And when traditional liberals go silent, as so many did in the summer of 2020, the progressive activist, more radical narrative takes over as the governing narrative of an organization. And so everybody, quote, went woke, and they life gets just better for everybody. We see all of this playing out on both sides in all these ways through COVID and how we do COVID policy. And he kind of has a helpful note here. It's going to get much worse. So hold on, let me take a drink. So Steve Bannon in 2018 said Trump needed to deal with the media by flooding the zone with shit and the fire hose of falsehood, using the tactic pioneered by Russian disinformation programs to keep Americans confused, disoriented, and angry. But back in 2018, there was an upper limit to the amount of shit available because it all had to be created by a person. Now, however, artificial intelligence is close to enabling the limitless spread of highly believable disinformation. Renee DiResta wrote this article called The Supply of Disinformation Will Soon Be Infinite, where he basically talks, along with his other essay, The Digital Maginot Line, he kind of just talks about how we are immersed in an evolving and ongoing conflict, an information world war, in which state actors, terrorists, and ideological extremists leverage the social infrastructure underpinning everyday life to sow discord and erode shared reality, she wrote. And the Soviets used to have to send over agents to cultivate Americans willing to do their bidding. But social media made it cheap and easy for Russia to do it through the Internet Research Agency, to create fake events and interfere in our elections. And that happened. It's all true. You know, these are facts. Like, if you don't believe it, it's not Trump derangement syndrome. The Russians actually did flood the zone with shit in 2016 and continue to do so. I don't think any of us are, blind to it. And Chinese are doing it too. Look what they've done to Hong Kong, he writes. So in the 21st century, America's tech companies rewired the world and created products that now appear to be corrosive to democracy, obstacles to shared understanding, and destroyers of the modern tower. So what do we do? He says, we can never return to the way things were in the pre-digital age. The norms, institutions, and forms of political participation that developed during the long era of mass communication are not going to work well now that technology has made everything so much faster and more multi-directional, when bypassing professional gatekeepers is so easy. And yet American democracy is now operating outside the bounds of sustainability. If we do not make major changes soon, then our institutions, our political system, and our society may collapse during the next major war, pandemic, financial crisis, and my computer reset. So what do? Redesign democracy for the digital age. And he's like, I can't do that, but I can suggest 3 categories of reform, 3 goals that must be achieved if democracy is to remain viable in the post-Babel era. We must harden democratic institutions so that they can withstand chronic anger and mistrust, reform social media so that it becomes less socially corrosive, and better prepare the next generation for democratic citizenship in this new age. Some of this I agree with, some of them I do not. So what does he mean by hardened democratic institutions? They need to function in levels of anger and misinformation and violence far above what we have today. And, the legislative branch was designed to require compromise, yet they've co-evolved into basically platforms for self-promotion. Congress is a place you go to get a blue check mark and to start padding your resume for your cable news career or your lobbyist job. It is not a place that you go to do hard things. Now, he talks about ranked choice voting. Senator Lisa Murkowski, for instance, got reelected. If you're one of those hardened conservatives, are not a fan of hers in any way, shape, or form. She would be dead in a closed primary, but she won in ranked choice voting. Sarah Palin is running in Alaska, and she has no chance because of ranked choice voting, where you go into the booth and you'd write down your top 4 choices or 5 choices or whatever it is. And then, the people who come out on top end up going to get the job, basically. And it tends to favor people who are more in the middle. Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, another victory of a more moderate position than a Donald Trump, for instance, winning thanks to ranked choice voting. Which I totally agree with this. I'm totally in favor of it. The next thing that they need to do is end gerrymandering. Couldn't agree more. These jobs should be done in a nonpartisan way. I've said for more than a decade, there's no reason AI can't, help draw these lines. And it's crazy that we don't end gerrymandering. Reform social media. Democracy cannot survive if its public squares are places where people fear speaking up, where no stable consensus can be reached. That's never going to change. This phenomenon of cancel culture where people are held accountable will never go away. It's just that people will become more used to it and care less about social shame, which is not necessarily a good thing. So, social shaming can be useful in kind of keeping people in check, because when somebody has no shame like Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin, you see the results. People have to have some shame. You have to feel guilty if you act badly. Like I'm teaching a 3-year-old the rules of society, and you You can't just let this personality of a toddler, like, everybody just can't act like this. There's rules in this house. So it's ruled by the most aggressive. My solution for this is shut the thing off. Quit using it. His is don't look to Congress to fix it. But the EU and the UK, they'll come in and they'll get rid of the share button. They'll clean all this stuff up and it'll be better. I don't agree with any of that. Now prepare the next generation. Gen Z, those born in and after 97, bear none of the blame for the mess we're in, but they're going to inherit it, and the preliminary signs that older generations are preventing them from learning how to handle it. He basically goes on to talk about, and he quotes actually Stephen Horowitz, the late economist, and his essay, Cooperation Over Coercion, the Importance of Unsupervised Childhood Play for Democracy and Liberalism. And, goes on to basically talk about allow unsupervised free play, which is nature's way of teaching young mammals the skills they'll need as adults, which for humans include the ability to cooperate and make and enforce rules, compromise, and adjudicate conflicts amongst each other without some other... You wonder why Gen Z and millennials all want the government to solve their problems, because you parents wouldn't leave us alone. You didn't let us work it out. Stephen Horowitz writes, free play prepares children for the art of association that Alexis de Tocqueville said was the key to the vibrance of American democracy, and argued that its loss posed a serious threat to liberal societies. A generation prevented from learning these social skills, warned, would habitually appeal to authorities to resolve disputes and would suffer from a coarsening of social interaction that would create a world of more conflict and violence. So I think the next time the 3-year-old and her best friend, the other 3-year-old, they're a week apart, she lives 2 doors down, they have so much fun playing. Next time they fight, or she fights with her cousin, I'm just going to go figure it out. This is not on me. You fight with your uncle, your cousin, do whatever you need to do. I'm not going to get involved. This is on you two to figure out. And then it goes on to talk about how it glorifies depression and anxiety are like social statuses, which is really unhealthy for people, which I think we all know. And he says that, free-range parenting is good. So these are things I totally agree with. Now, one thing that he mentioned in here, I believe, or mentioned elsewhere, was every person, basically end anonymity on these platforms. Everybody has to load up their driver's license and show that they're a real person, and no one under 18 can use these platforms. Actually, I don't think it was, I think it was Chris Griswold in that National Affairs article. That's a privacy nightmare, and it doesn't work now, so why would we do more of it? So it will become even less effective for these platforms. So no. So the story I've told is bleak, he finishes, and there's little evidence to suggest that America will return to some semblance of normalcy and normality, in the next 5 or 10 years. Which side is going to become conciliatory? What is the likelihood that Congress will enact major reforms that strengthen democratic institutions or detoxify social media? Meh. The government can't do it. So will we do anything about it? When Tocqueville toured the U.S. in the 1830s, he was impressed by the American habit of forming voluntary associations to fix local problems, rather than waiting for kings or nobles to act, as Europeans would do. That habit is still within us today, and in recent years, Americans have started hundreds of groups and organizations dedicated to building trust and friendship across the political divide, including Bridge USA, Braver Angels, and BridgeAlliance.us. We cannot expect Congress and tech companies to save us. We must change ourselves and our communities. What would it be like to live in Babel in the days after its destruction? We know. It's a time of confusion and loss, but it is time to reflect, listen, and build. So I think you can see why I liked this article and found that this was an important article for all of you to hear and understand. I think he gets at a lot of the problems that we talk a lot about here in the program, has some really solid solutions. So I would totally recommend just rereading it for yourself, sharing the article, talking about it with people, quoting some of the things that you like, and, telling people about the show, and hey, join the bonus show, and you can hear this article read with some additional commentary. So with that, I say thank you for being here. Thank you for being a patron. Thank you for being a part of this community. We love you, and we will be back again next week. I think we're going to have Dale stopping by, who's going to give us some life advice. And I think you're going to love it. I think you're going to really enjoy it. He hasn't told me what he wants to teach yet, but, as our life coach, it's going to be wise. It's going to be good information and reliable, I think, right? All right, well, we'll see you next week.